Welcome to another episode of the Go-to-Market Lab. This is a podcast where founders learn the art and the science of scaling their go-to-market strategy through different pivots and stages of their SaaS software business. We have today joining us Jim Wilson from Costanoa Ventures. So we're going to get into his background here, and really exciting to have him on the show today. But let me just give you an outline into what we're going to discuss, listeners. So let me set the stage. You created your startup business. You're really excited. Product is at a point where you can really bring it to market and start selling it. Guess who your first salespeople are going to be? It's going to be the founders. Now, I'm stereotyping a little bit, but I'll say 90% of the time, the founders typically aren't kind of expert salespeople. They don't come from the sales world. Perhaps they had a turn of selling, but they are the founders because they are subject matter experts. And many a times they're technical founders in which have product backgrounds in the SaaS software space. However, they do need to get really good at sales fast because they are going to be the lifeline of the first set of revenue coming into the company. So today's episode is really focused on helping you founders who are listening, who might not be extremely, 20-year seasoned veterans in the sales space, on what you need to focus on. There's a ton of things that you can spend your time with. And so we're going to net out, if you can only do a few things, how do you do sales well and right in those early days? And so to support me and through this podcast, we're going to discuss these four areas. First, we're going to talk about just net it out. Give me my checklist. As a founder, what do I need to know to be a good seller? Then we're going to double click in a couple areas that are really important to discuss. First is around discovery and qualification. The next will be around elevator pitches and demos. And then lastly, we always get this question, what about pricing? What about the price book? What do we need to do with that? So we'll touch on that lightly into what we should worry about at these early stages. But before further ado, let me talk a little bit about my buddy here, Jim Wilson, on the call. So I'm going to have him talk about his experience. And throughout this, I know he's going to give you a lot of war stories here, but he is known for his sales execution. And his role at his venture firm is that he really focuses on helping the founders specifically on their sales strategies and go to market. He has definitely done his time as an operator. So Jim, I know you've run sales globally at Sumo Logic and Nice Systems and Merced, and you've had time at Microsoft and some of the big boys. But I think most importantly, Jim, if you could just give the audience a bit of your background as to some of your highlights that you've had on the venture capital side of this and your interaction with startups, especially as of, this market has been tough, right? And enterprise selling the last 2, 3, 4 years. So just a little bit about yourself.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen. Well, first, happy holidays and Merry Christmas to you and everybody in the audience. Depending on when you are watching this, it'll either be post opening presents or before. So hopefully this is a nice present for you. So to your question, I've been at Costanoa Ventures now for 7 years. Prior to that, I had a career in sales, like a lot of people in your audience. Started out as an SE, actually, and went on to be a rep and then a VP of sales and CRO. I've done time overseas, building out an overseas organization. I've built out inside sales teams, enterprise sales teams, channel strategies, and I've done it in a bunch of different sectors, starting with a company called Parametric Technology that sold CAD/CAM software to engineers, not software engineers, by the way, actually mechanical engineers that are actually building things. My last job was at Sumo Logic, selling to developers mostly and selling an infrastructure tool. At Costanoa, because we're an early stage venture firm, we invest in companies that are pre-revenue. So they've got a product and they've got an idea. In some cases, they've even got an idea. Oftentimes they're incubating in our offices. And I'm the person that works with them to figure out something called founder sales. And founder sales is talked about a lot, but I think very few people articulate what it really means. Because of that, I become, if for no other reason, just working with it, a little bit of an expert in helping founders figure out sales, helping them figure out their first sales hire, and then helping that first sales hire be successful. And as we both know, that's as important to salespeople as anything else, is the founder you're working with and making sure there's good synergies between them.
Well, I mean, that's a good segue into, I think, the first section we're going to talk about in this podcast, which is really, so Jim, we'll do a little role play, which is something sales love to do. So Jim, thanks. I've just joined the fund. We got a product launch. We're super excited about it. What's really awesome, Jim, is I've got 3 intros. I've got 3 sales meetings next week. And so if we got a chance to pitch the product, we've never pitched before. So tell me where to start.
Great, great. Well, first, I would say, Kathleen, congratulations on getting started. The first thing I will tell you is that with founder sales, it really does start at the beginning, from more art at the beginning to more science at the end. And so as you learn about sales and your customer, and again, I'm speaking to a founder, you want to be able to document that and turn that into a repeatable sales playbook. Oftentimes, salespeople build repeatable sales playbooks, but for founders, you need to start thinking about that from day one. And you need to do that for two reasons. One, investors, when you raise your second round of funding, are going to want to know, do you have a repeatable sales process that I can invest in? You can build a sales team or a channel team or a product-led growth motion and scale up. The second reason you want to have a repeatable sales process is because when you eventually hire your first salesperson or you expand your sales team, you need to teach them something. You can't just have them come in and figure it out from day one. So that's usually what I tell founders is you got to figure out for those two reasons: for investors, because they want to know what a repeatable sales process is, and for your first sales hire. Now, there's a caveat to this. A lot of people write articles, and I'm one of them, that about what's the perfect repeatable sales process and all these things. That's great. Remember, for founders, give yourselves a break. At the beginning, it's very much trial and error. So you're trying to figure things out. But there are some basic components that you want to think about. And Kathleen, that's really what I talk to them about, is what are some of those basic components of a repeatable sales process?
Yeah. So let's get into that, because I'm stepping back into Kathleen's body now. What is those basic components of a sales process that let's put our framing into my question of in those early days. So, these are first meetings. And so likely our pitches might change and maybe the questions we're going to change. So let's talk about, walk our listeners through what are the tenets of the sales process that we should be really honing in on in those first set of meetings.
So I'm going to start with what I call the foundation. And most people already know most of this foundation. And then I'll talk about maybe the 4 or 5 key components of a repeatable sales process. So people know that you have to create an elevator pitch. And to me, an elevator pitch is just a very specific, very short description of your company, why you started the company, what problems it solves, and what the value is. You also need to have a product demo, right? So for most companies that are selling to a technical audience or selling a product in the enterprise space, people expect to see a demo of the product. And then finally, you need to have some type of an idea of how you price it. I think that's something that's super important for companies, and we'll talk about it later, but I think they often underestimate how important that is. Now, aside from that foundation, I think it's 7 different components. The first is sales stages or sales plays. So think of a sales stage as what the perfect sales cycle looks like, what the buyer and you, the seller, would go through in a perfect sales cycle. And, I will tell you that it's not, hey, I'm going to talk about the product and then you're going to buy it, right? There's a lot of steps in between. It's usually not many, 4 to 5, but having an idea of what a perfect sales cycle looks like is important. The second key component is use cases and value proposition. You hear the term value proposition a lot. What value proposition really is just the customer pain. What customer pain do we solve? Why is this urgent? And how do you attach value to what you do today? And how is it better than the solution they have in place today? The third key component is ideal customer profile. Are you selling to the right company that need your solution? You pair that with buyer personas, which is who are the people that we sell to? Who are the people that uniquely have this problem that our solutions solve? Then some of the other things just to round out repeatable process is discovery questions and qualification criteria. This is something often overlooked, and I think we'll talk about it. But this is where you want to get into a two-way conversation and figure out if this is a good fit for you. In other words, is your product uniquely set up to solve their problem or not? This is important for figuring out product market fit. Common objections that customers will have. You'll learn this along the way. Competitive positioning, right? You want to know what are the alternatives, including doing nothing or building it yourself. And then finally, customer case studies. As you sell, you really want to build up a list of customer stories, because I can tell you, talking to most enterprise buyers, mostly they want to hear about your product, but they also want to hear about how other customers use your product. But those are the kind of the key tenets, if you will, of a repeatable sales process.
So let's unpack a couple of those. So starting, maybe let's go into story time. So can you give us, and I'm a big fan of what good looks like stories, maybe what not so good looks like stories, bad, I word bad, but I'd love to hear a story about a sales process, kind of a deal flow that went really well, founder-led sales that just kind of sticks out in your head is, wow, if everybody could just run it like this, that would be great.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll talk about a company that is incubating with us right now called Run Reveal, which is a modern SIM tool that is having a lot of success out of the gate. The founders there have worked with their first sales hire to figure out a basic sales process that involves discovering qualification. Because they're a modern SIM, they have some criteria that they think customers will think is either a good fit for them or a bad fit. For example, as you would imagine, a modern SIM tool, generally they have an opinion that modern software companies are better equipped to use this right now. But the second stage they've figured out is how to do a really short but impactful proof of concept, right? So proof of concept is something that a lot of founders need to figure out. Companies aren't just going to buy your product based on a demo and a technical deep dive. They want to know what's the business value and what's the technical value of the product. Technical value usually being how's it going to work in my environment. They've figured out how to price it. And specifically, they've figured out how to price it to make it easy for a customer to buy. What I would tell founders today is a key tenet of a good pricing model in an early stage company is just making it as easy as possible for a customer to get started using your product.
Yeah. So maybe talk to us about so no matter what you're selling, what are really the key things that you should be listening for in those first couple calls when you are qualifying and really learning about, is this a real opportunity or not? Because I find that reps have this, managers have this, big companies have this, but definitely founders have this. So I call it happy years. Happy years as to, happy years are really easy too when you're getting introductions into your first calls because these are personal contacts to a certain extent. So they want to tell you, kind of, they don't love the product to your face. So what are we looking for? What are we sniffing out in that discovery and qualification process?
Well, the first thing I would say is the big picture with discovery and qualification is you want to set up the first meeting that you have with a customer, whether you're just doing an overview or an overview and a demo, you want to set up a cadence where it's a two-way conversation. One of the biggest mistakes I see is you schedule a 45-minute call with a customer and you talk for 43 minutes and you only ask the customer only talks for 2. And maybe those 2 minutes are literally just the introduction. So you want to set up this cadence of a conversation so that you can talk a little bit about your solution, maybe why you built it, what it solves, and then ask them some thoughtful, logical questions that frankly draw them out a little bit to tell them to learn a little bit about how they're doing things today, what problems or challenges they have today, and with the ultimate goal of being how it will fit their solution. So the first thing is make sure to set up this cadence. The second is have 3 to 5 key discovery questions and have a thesis on how those answers map to your ideal customer profile, your ICP. Again, this is something I don't think founders spend enough time doing. Not everybody is a perfect fit for your product. To start to think about, hey, the ideal customer for me is a smaller company that doesn't have a security organization and needs outsourcing help to do security tools. That might be a perfect fit for BugCrowd, another company in our portfolio that sells a crowdsourced platform solution like that. So have those questions ready and then have some idea of how the answers map to the ICP or the ideal profile for you. To me, a perfect outcome of a first call is they've learned a little bit about your product and you've learned a lot about their current environment. So you can make a judgment call with how good of a fit.
That's a great point. And you know what? There's a lot of note takers that we're all using right now. They'll keep you honest and tell you how much percentage you've talked. I think those are good things because I think what we don't remember is that if I think about my best sales calls, I probably said one line and I'm one line. That was amazing because people like to hear themselves talk. I think one other thing that I know I saw on one of your blog posts on your firm's site is that people usually might be a little bit guarded about sharing their dirty laundry. And so as you're talking about those questions, I think keep in mind, it's not going to happen in one phone call potentially, but as you ask the questions, you've got a layer. So I'm a big fan of, tell me more. How is that? Repeating the last, question. Huh. And because I think too, one of the suggestions I've heard you make before in our calls before has been, okay, they say they have X problem. Who does that impact?
Right.
What does the board say about that? Right. So you get a sense of who cares about that problem, how big it is and how they're quantifying it. Don't just take the face value answer, but be intellectually. I love reps who at the end of the day, they actually don't know anything about the domain, but they're just curious. They just ask why is that? And if you just do that, you could have a great discovery call. And so I think to your point, you don't have to, I like how you said, you really just have to have a couple of core questions. But if you keep asking the why behind it, you're probably going to get more.
Correct. And look, you said the key thing, which is curious. And let's call it what it is. It's hard, right? You have to strike a balance between a potential buyer on the call with you that wants to learn from your product. So a lot of times, like, you've got to go first. You have to kind of reveal to them how your product works, what a demo looks like. But at the same time, you want to get them into a cadence where they're comfortable speaking. And it's more than just yes, no answers. It's, to your point, it's like, no, you have to be genuinely curious to say, no, can you tell me more about how you do this today without our product? Oh, can you tell me more about the solution that you have today or some of the challenges? So the key is kind of getting them into that cadence of back and forth talk.
Yeah. And I think hopefully with those set of questions, you can do some of the homework. No excuse nowadays with ChatGPT and Claude to do your prep before that. All you got to do is twist the question a little bit just to so you've done your research.
Man, I can tell you, I get pitched all the time from people, and for founders and salespeople alike, do your homework. It's so easy to do research and do viable research, right? One of the hacks that I tell founders is go find people that are in the market that like to go to conferences and present on how they're doing something, because those folks are proud of what they've built. And if you reference somebody's white paper that they wrote on a best practice or a conference they went to and they spoke, believe me, you're going to have their attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's unpack here kind of the next set of one of the key assets, the foundation that you referred to earlier, which is the elevator pitch, A, and B, the demo. They're kind of top three. If you do nothing, if you remember nothing else about those two assets, well, the top three things that you better make sure that each of those assets do. And I call them assets, right? For the technical folks online, I'm not talking about a computer asset, but I'm talking about a marketing asset, so to speak. So top three tenets that an elevator pitch.
Wow, this is great. So I've got a couple of thoughts on this. So first, as it goes to the elevator pitch, look, especially, and again, I'm speaking mostly to early stage founders, but I think one of the top three things is tell a story, make it interesting, right? Why did you start this company? Why did you build this product? What compelled you to do it? Because oftentimes there's some great, interesting human stories to that, and people want to hear it. So I think that's one that's often overlooked. Two is you've got to elevate your message, especially in the elevator pitch. It's not about the features and the functions. It's about the business value and the problem that you solve. And that is really hard for founders, because you want to talk about the features and functions and you want to go into it in detail. But the reality is you're bringing a new prospect along, and you have to start with, at a higher level, what's the business problem you're solving for? And then the third thing I would say is, look, you really do want to be specific with customer stories and metrics if you have them. If you don't have customers and stories and metrics, then tell a story on the ideal customer should get this type of value and improve this much. Metrics matter. So when you say, we will reduce your mean time to investigate or your mean time to repair your solution by 47%, our customers have found this, that's super specific, right? And I think the more you can use a metric to explain what your solution does, the better. The final thing too, Kathleen, I'll say, and this is often overlooked, how is your product different? I think in today's world where there's 5 options for everything that you're trying to do, you trying to be very specific and say, here's how we're different than anything else on the market is very impactful and very important.
Yeah. And I think also when you're explaining the different, hopefully they're concise and brief. I have heard the different, tell me if this resonates with you. I've heard that answer that question that can solidly take like 5 minutes long.
A hack that I tell people all the time is write this stuff out. I'm always shocked how many people don't write out the elevator pitch in plain English words, put it together. The other thing is, look, if you have a hard time, struggle with it, put it into a slide, make it bullet points and have the slide as a background, right? To talk through. So it's okay to do that. But the key thing that you said is keep it concise, keep it short. People try to pack too much into a very small topic at the beginning, which is just, again, why you started the company, why you built the product, what's the key business value, how it's different.
I'm gonna throw you a left field question here. So you're making me think of something, Jim. So here's just a theory that I have. So a lot of founders are confident people who are domain experts and very proud of their product. And so, that being said, doing sales is a very humbling position.
Yes.
I wonder if sometimes the tendency to overtalk is to, the peacock, put up peacock feathers and show how much you know, how much you've done. And it really becomes a about me experience. Is there any, do you think I'm off base?
No, I think it's true. And look, I mean, salespeople, that's what our DNA is, right? We're supposed to be like that. Founders too. Just turn it back. Turn on the curiosity button and turn off and pull down the peacock feathers. That would be my advice. Like when you show up as a knowledgeable person that understands the domain and you are very customer centric and you talk in terms of value to your other customers or potential value to customers. And then third, you show up as intellectually curious about how they work their business and their job. You are going to be a trusted advisor with this prospect and your sales cycle is going to be a lot easier.
Yeah. That's great advice. I think at the end of the day too, as well, sometimes as they're talking, they don't realize how much more they know than the prospect. And, your prospects are not going to be like, excuse me, I understand half of what you're saying. I always remember, I have an 8 and 10-year-old. And so sometimes, we've never done baby talk in our house. And sometimes I hope my husband doesn't listen to this. He was explaining a soccer drill to my daughter last night, and he was telling her to transpose her drill to the game. I was like, she doesn't know what transpose means, So, being able to I almost think about visualizing that you're talking to your friend who's not in the industry or your 75-year-old mom and just be able, how do you net this out to something that anybody can understand? There's plenty of time for you to go technical and deep, but to have that image in our head, I really hope.
I mean, look, we talk within Costanoa Ventures about advice to founders. And, I don't mean it disparagingly, but like bring it to kindergarten level, right? But then the other thing I often tell founders is, look, you're speaking to normal humans, right? These are not people that we invested in you because you're a superhuman around what you've done and what you've built and your superpowers. But now you've got to bring it down to the regular human level. And best founders that I know can do it. And look, the worst thing you can do is give a 30-minute presentation. And at the end of it, they don't know what you do. They don't know what the product is, right? So you have to simplify it.
Exactly. Well, talking about simplifying, let's talk about pricing, which in my personal experience at some big box companies, pricing is nothing but simple. It can be nothing but simple. But, so those early days, and let's just frame it up, kind of where we're at. Like, listen, you're happy to get a deal. And so the person's going to pay you money. Sure, I'll take, 20,000, 50,000, et cetera. So what really in this pricing, what really should a founder be thinking about for pricing in those first deals?
Yeah. So look, this is such a soapbox issue for me because I see it over and over again. The first thing I would say is treat pricing like a first-class feature in your product. Like it has got to be, and it can be for a lot of the most successful software companies out there. Pricing was a key differentiator, just like other features in their product. So treat it like a first-class citizen. The second thing is keep it simple. So you've got to keep pricing simple. If a buyer can't, behind closed doors, explain it to their boss or to the economic buyer, to the person that is ultimately making the decision to cut the check or to pay for it, then it's too complicated, right? And then the final thing I would say is focus more on packaging and pricing. So sometimes the actual price itself is less important than how you package the solution, right? And make it easy for customers to onboard. Again, that's where packaging can be super important. It may be in the early stages, like it's just an all-in-one pricing. It may be that you do t-shirt sizes, small, medium, large type of deployments, but just focus on the packaging and how the value creation, the value that they get from the product matches to the package.
Now, just to make sure our listeners are tracking, as you say, packaging, can you give some examples of what kind of good packaging looks like? Like, what do you?
Sure. Like the most common example, which you see in a lot of companies, is breaking up the features by a corporate, you can call it corporate pricing and enterprise pricing. Corporate pricing might have a lower feature set. Enterprise pricing might have a higher feature set. But another thing I've seen a lot recently is a base package. So a base package that gets you the basic functionality, and then you buy not features, but you buy a module on top of it. And again, I'm not suggesting this is where it gets tricky, right? Because balance that with keep it simple, right? So in the early days, it might be, no, it's just a single price and you get everything. That's fine. Whatever makes it easy for the customer to buy and makes it simple. That's the theme, if you will. But if you can figure out innovative ways to package it, I think that's super helpful as well.
Yeah. And I love how you're stressing simple, because I want to highlight what you said and make sure it's not lost in the listeners, because there's a lot of gold there. The reason why you want to keep it simple is that you will not be in the room when your champion is explaining the pricing to procurement or to their boss. And so if they can't articulate it the level that they're confident in, they're not going to bitch it. So, if they can't, I mean, trust me when I say I've seen, I've worked at some of the bigger software companies, like the meters are, some of the biggest software companies have 10,000 meters, in all the different products. And it's just a lot, you're a startup, you don't need to do any of that stuff. So, but to your point, just pick, your small, medium, large, whatever it is, and just make it so that it fits on a slide.
And look, the thing that I think is kind of a misinformation out there is I think founders think it needs to be formal, and it doesn't. You experiment a lot with pricing early on, especially early on, where you can change it pretty quickly, right? Again, balance that with being customer centric, balance it with being simple. But I think the more experimentation you do early on, the better. I think, Kathleen, the one thing I always add when I'm talking to founders is it's a customer that can explain it behind closed doors. And then again, your average human salesperson that's going to have to sell it beyond when you've got product market fit and you've hired a sales team that need to be able to explain it. If those two things don't check the box, and it's too complicated.
Yeah. And I think that's key. I mean, you said this earlier, there's an advantage of being a founder in the sales process, because you can tell this very engaging founder story, because it's you who are the hero in that story. But at some point, if the founder has to work on the business, they have to be able to be injected in their process later. And that means that somebody else needs to, take the qualification and et cetera, because let's just be honest, if I'm talking to the founder in the first call, I'm not going to talk to your salesperson, I'm going to talk to the founder. And so the earlier you get engaged, I think that to me is one of the key things, is at some point, making sure you're setting yourself up to where you can easily, what you brought about to, you said the first part, you can easily get your first hire and say, hey, this is the playbook, right? Experiment it. I know the questions, but always be thinking, if I was not in the room, how am I going to train this person on how to do?
Well, and now we're getting back to the playbook stuff. Is yes, it's important for investors that there's a repeatable process, but a lot of times the founders ask me, like, when should I make my first sales hire? And there's a lot of talk around product market fit, and when, is it 10 customers? Is it $1 million ARR? Is it 500K ARR? But to me, the simple answer is, when you feel like you have enough that you could hire someone on day one and sit them down and say, here's what a sales process looks like at our company. Here's the steps broadly that we think you will go through. Can you start to work and learn this so that you can drive this process? When you get to where you can sit down and say that, or I'll ask them to explain it to me, right? And it's simple and it's 4 or 5 stages, then you're in good shape. Then you can start to bring on your first head of sales.
And so just to go off script and double click on that, is it the first head of sales that should be your first hire? Like, what are the types of first hires that you think?
Oh, good question. It's a good topic. But when I say head of sales, I say it very generically, right? And it's a great topic. Like, I think, again, the tendencies of founders. So let me talk about the bad tendencies of founders that that want them to stay away from. So the first is, you can't outsource sales. There's a reason it's called founder sales. You, as the founder, need to figure out and sell from start to finish. I would say generally the first 5 to 10 customers, right? Might be a little less, might be a little more, but generally you need to do that sales process. You need to do it because you need to figure out the initial repeatable process. You need to be able to train someone that comes on board, but mostly it's because as the founder, this is your superpower, right? So that's one. When you bring somebody on board, I think the tendency is to want to bring on someone who's got a lot of experience. And I think that's actually the wrong thing to look for. I think the best thing to look for is intellectual curiosity and specifically intellectual curiosity in this domain that you are selling to. So like, here's a common test I ask founders to do. In the interview process, show a demo. And the really great salespeople that make first sales hires will ask a ton of questions about the demo and how does it work and what happens here and what do they say to this and what does this feature mean and what does this do? Because they're genuinely curious. And if you think about it, it makes a ton of sense. I'm the salesperson. I'm going to have to sell this thing. I want to know how it works. I want to know what those features are. And if you don't have someone that leans into the demo and is super curious about how it works, you've probably got the wrong person.
Yeah. That's great. And I think there's all kinds of permutations of what the first hire can look at because it depends on, do you have some inbound flow? Do you have some outbound flow? As a technical, should be a sales engineer, all those types of things. But I think, to me, you have to also have somebody who is able to take what material you have, is probably not a lot, and be like kind of go with it. Right. And
well, yes, that's the other thing is again, a simplistic term for it is hire builders. So hire people that want to actually take the skeleton of your repeatable process and turn it into a fuller playbook and want to experiment with like, oh no, I've done 10 calls now and here I'm going to update our discovery questions because I've learned that this is more of a pattern, or here's a use case that's new that I want to explore that we can sell into. You got to hire people that are intellectually curious and hire people that are builders.
Got it. Perfect. Okay. We have covered so much in this episode. And I know, Jim, we could double click on any of these topics for a full hour, but I'm going to try to do my best and kind of summarize the notes I was taking and kind of the levels that the nuggets of gold. So number one, sales playbook with the idea of what you're trying to create is a process that you can train somebody else on, e.g. that's repeatable, that if you weren't, if you had to go on holiday for a couple of weeks, somebody else could run because they know how it works.
And so Kathleen, start early and iterate on it, right? There's no
Yeah. And then one of those double clicks into that sales process is as you are looking at your qualification process, to be able to map those discovery questions to your ICP and what those answers are. So you can get a sense of what am I really looking for? And is this really the ICP that I want to sell to? So you can kind of make some decisions on where do you spend your time. I heard another great nugget that I heard is being able to frame up the business value. So making sure you talk less, listen more, listen for the problems, and making sure you're framing up the business value in your initial pitch and your demo, as well as making sure that you hire builders, making sure you look for intellectual curiosity. And I think most importantly, be human in the process, be concise, but talk like a human being, not like the superhero in which you as a founder are. You're the superhero. The rest of us need to get to the place that you're at, but we're probably not there yet. With that summary, if the listeners could only get one thing from you, like one thing, or like if you have nothing else that you retain, but this one thing, what would be the one piece of advice you're going to give a founder listening on this call?
Man, okay, that's good. To summarize it, I think if I had to pick one thing from a repeatable sales process, it's focus on a really good discovery and qualification cadence. So figure out a great way to have, call it a 45-minute meeting with a prospect that includes a little bit of the company overview, a little bit of the product overview. Maybe it's a demo, maybe it's showing some dashboards, but mostly what it is a cadence where you speak a little bit about your solution, why you started the company, the problems, but then you have questions that draw a customer out. So those 45 minutes is a discovery and qualification meeting, less of an overview. With the goal being that at the end of that 45 minutes, the customer knows a little bit more about your product and you know a little bit more about their environment.
Yeah. And I heard you say the word little bit, meaning you're not going to solve hunger, be besties after that first call. So just make sure you know it's a process. So you're going to get.
That's right. It's an absolute process. You want to start small. Don't compress an entire set of 10 steps in the sales cycle into one meeting. Just start small. Gain credibility in that first call, especially for founders, as a trusted advisor. Someone that really cares about their customers, really cares about you, is intellectually curious, and has built something really special that's also very differentiated.
Love that. Love that. This has been awesome, super fun, Jim. I have a feeling after the listeners start commenting on this, we may have to have you come back for a part 2. But for all those listening, thank you so much for joining us on yet another episode of the Go-to-Market Lab. I really hope today's discussion provided you with actionable insights to help you master your founder-led sales strategy, your go-to-market strategy, and help you accelerate your growth at this stage or whatever stage that you're at. But if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe. Leave us a review on whatever modality you're listening to, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, what have you. Your feedback is really important. So ping me directly. I'm sure, Jim, I'm going to read the offer. I'm sure he wouldn't mind you pinging him on LinkedIn as well.
Absolutely.
Ask questions if you have suggestions, or maybe just want to share, hey, I heard his story, but let me just share my story and maybe some knowledge that you have and the lessons learned that you've had. Please feel free to share those. Stay connected with me on LinkedIn for more resources. And so you can be also informed about upcoming episodes. But yes, for our mission today and for our mission in this podcast is we want to together share go-to-market stories so we can navigate the complexities of this ever-changing market and help you unlock the potential of your startup and reach your growth goals faster. Thank you for listening today, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks all. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.